Good morning or good afternoon. Hey guys, this is just a quick video in order to show you how to do the chi-square problem that is in your textbook. You'll find it on page 208 and 209 of your IB Biology course book using the Oxford University Press website. You can find that if you go into your modules. One of our homework assignments for, I think it was lesson 3, was signing up for your IB textbooks. So if you haven't done that yet, go in there, definitely check it out, follow those instructions, and get your textbook. So pages 208 and 209. And this is talking about chi-square testing. Now, chi-square testing, again, is when you use a statistical method of analysis to see whether or not there is a significant relationship between the presence or absence of two qualitative variables. So in this case, we're looking at the presence or absence of two species relative to one another. So what this question is asking is, there's heather and moss growing out here on these moors, I suppose is what you would call it, the swampy area. Okay, so is the presence of the heather related at all to the presence of the moss, or do they just kind of show up randomly in different places and they really don't influence the presence or absence of each other? Really, this gets at whether or not there is a likely mutualism or symbiosis in general between these two species. If there is, then they're most likely going to be found closer to one another than otherwise, right? So that's kind of what we're looking for. So how do we set this up? Well, the first thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and create this table down here. This table is what they give you on page 208, and we're going to recreate it in our sheets as follows. So we have species A and species B spread out in the following way. We can see that the way that the chart is set up, it's asking us whether species A is present or absent, and whether species B is present or absent, and it creates a bunch of really interesting scenarios down here. Okay, so go ahead and kind of just basically copy this, this format into your Google spreadsheet, and you'll kind of see it this way. Okay, and now let me go ahead and describe what each one of these pieces means. Okay, so species A, we're going to go ahead and call the heather, because that's what we're looking at, heather and moss. So A would be heather, and B will be moss. And we go ahead and we set it up in the following way. And we put in the numbers that they gave us, all right? So once we go ahead and set up these bolded terms, we're then going to go ahead and figure out where these numbers go. And these are our scenarios. Sorry. So the scenarios that they gave us are heather only, but no moss, is the first area they sampled. So when we go through there, heather, which is our species A, was present, but moss was absent. So it would be in this box here, present, absent, and they would put 9 in there because 9 is the number they gave us. They found 9 individuals of heather where there was no moss. In the second sample area that they sampled, they found moss only. They found 7 moss, but no heather. So in here, we go over here to species B is present, but A is absent, and we click in and we put 7 in. Okay, then we would say where both species were present, and they found 57 plants that were all present all together. So we go in here and we find, okay, 57, A and B is present. And then finally, when both are absent, they found 27 total individuals. So absent, absent is this box, and there we go. So we start with just these 4 numbers. To calculate row totals and column totals, what we would do is we would go in here and say to calculate this row total, and I'll go ahead and delete this here so you can go ahead and see how I calculate it. To calculate the row totals, you'd come over here, and I just want to add this number and this number. Now remember that in your sheets, you can go ahead and do this using an equation. So I say equals, and then I can come over here and click on this number, and then I can say shift and the plus symbol, and then click on this number, and hit enter, and that'll give me the added sum of these two individuals in the row, which will give me my row total. I'm then going to go ahead and take the box and drag that down to here, and that'll give me the row total for this guy too. Then I want to get my column total. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add these two together to get my column total. So I'll say equals this guy plus this one, enter, equals that. And I'm going to go ahead and drag this over, and that'll give me that number. Okay, now for my grand total, which is going to be the number over here in the corner, I can drag either the column or the row, it doesn't matter. I will get the same grand total because this is the total number of organisms in my entire study. So that's how you get your column totals and your row totals and your grand total. Now, This is a little bit different than the chi-square problems that you did before, because before we were only considering a very simple scenario. For example, we were considering the month that you were born and your baseball, like how many people became baseball players, or we were considering the number of M&Ms of a particular color in a packet. Now, those are very simple scenarios, and it was very easy for us to come up with the expected value based on the null hypothesis, right? The null hypothesis being that there was an equal number of colors of M&Ms in each one of the packets, and so we could do some easy division, figure that out, or that an equal number of baseball players from each month would become, baseball players. Didn't matter on the month, and we could go ahead and easily calculate that. Those were simple. But here's a bit more complex, because when we're looking at whether two species' presence or absence is affecting the other one, we actually have four scenarios, which is what we talked about before. They could both be present, they could both be absent, or one could be present and the other could be absent. And so because we have these four scenarios, we're actually going to have four different expected values, because we're not expecting all of these scenarios to be equally as likely as we were before in the previous simplistic versions of the chi-square. So here, each one of these expected values is going to be based off a situation that is each going to have a different sort of expected frequency in which it's going to occur. To calculate those frequencies, we're going to use a formula that they provide over here on page 208. The expected frequency is the row total times the column total divided by the grand total. We can see that right here, row times column divided by grand. Multiplication in your sheets, you should note, is done not with an X, but with this little star key, which you can get by hitting Shift in the number 8. Okay, so how do we go ahead and calculate this? Well, for this value right here, B but not A, let's take a look at that one first. Okay, so B but not A, if we look at it, is going to be this one over here. So we say B is present but not A. A is absent. It's going to be this cell right here. This is the observed value, right? 7 is the observed value that we are ascribing to the B is present but not A. Now for this scenario, we're going to go ahead and use this row times column divided by grand. Okay, so if I start with the 7 and I go over, I see that my row total is 64. If I start at the 7 again and I go down, I see the column total for 7 is 34. So 64 times 34 divided by 100 is going to follow this right here, right? My row times my column divided by my grand. Now I can go ahead and plug that in here pretty simply in this cell. I can say equals, and I'll say my row, okay, and then shift and 8 times my column, okay, and then actually I should put these in parentheses so I can go ahead and do the division. So sorry about that, parentheses, divided by my grand. And there we go. So equals row times column divided by grand. I put these in parentheses to make sure that it would treat that as one numerator and not divide weirdly by 100 in any other place. And equal, and there's my number. I do the same for this one, okay? So for this one, I can actually just do this to show you the formula. For this one, A but not B, I went up here, A is present but B is absent. This would be in the 9 box. Okay, for the 9, my row total is 36. My column is 66. Okay, so that was pretty easy. I would just get equals my row, click on this, times my column, click on this, divided by, again, my grand, which is always going to be the same. So you go through and you calculate those expected frequencies for each one of these guys. Now that you have your different expected frequencies, and you already have your observed frequencies, because those are what they provided you with, all right, all you have to do is start following the formula, right? So O minus E, all I would do is say this number minus this number, okay, and then put enter, and then I could grab this and drag it down, and lo and behold, it will calculate the different number for each one of these guys. Now I do, let me check and just make sure that that did that right, because I don't want to tell you to do it that way and find out it's wrong. Yes, it's fine. Okay. All right, so then you do that, and then you go ahead and calculate using your this right here, right? You keep adding it to each one, and eventually you get the sum, which is your chi-square value, right? You would then go ahead and calculate that chi-square value, its significance, based off of the critical value. So if we go over here, you'll see that I've attached a link to the critical value. You can click on this and you can go down and figure out whether or not your chi-square is critical. Remember, it must be 95% or above in order to be critical, right? A p-value of less than 0.05. And then don't forget to calculate your degree of freedom, which is your total number of data points minus 2. Okay guys, well I hope that this has helped you all out. I'm not going to do all these calculations for you because you already should know how to do that. And the previous video goes over it as well. So I hope this was helpful. Good luck, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, take care.